Oh, hello, and welcome to Dark Passages. Dark Passages is a weekly podcast presented by me, Chris Stone, reading stories I've written over the past 15 years or so. Route 66, Episode 4. The Blue Oasis Inn was one of those outdoor motels where all of the rooms emptied straight into a parking lot. It was a two-story motel shaped in an L, doors painted alternatively pink, tangerine, and seafoam green, numbers stenciled above them. The motel sign greeted them on their way into the parking lot. It was a towering neon arch boasting an outlined green palm tree. The bright green tree blinked and bayed, lights fading and intensifying as only neon lights can. Words at the top of the tree logo read, Blue Oasis Inn, in blazing purple. The O in the Blue Oasis sign was burned out and probably had been for years. The sign also boasted HBO, air conditioning, and vacancy in neon red. Finally, their tagline was included as if almost an afterthought in bright blue neon. It read, Your Oasis in the Desert. Rain pulled the Plymouth up toward the front desk office, the home of the only light lit for miles, other than, of course, the giant blazing palm tree motel sign. He turned to Moon to ask her to wait there, that he would go check them in, but she was already out of the car, her bare feet slapping the concrete as she made her way for the office. Rain killed the engine and followed. Junior was what the faded plastic name tag pinned to his shirt said his name was. But Rain figured it was more of a nickname than a real name. I mean, who would call their kid Junior? I mean, who would actually write something that absurd on a birth certificate? Regardless as to how he came to be known as such, Junior dwarfed Rain. He was a hulking figure with a hefty belly that hinted at his love for greasy burgers and fries. One of his meaty paws covered the tiny bell sitting on the desk that separated them. His brow was furrowed and his face was tattooed with something just shy of rage. His red, runny, disease eyes narrowed on Rain. Junior stabbed a stubby finger at a sign taped to the grimy counter that read, One ring, that's all you'll need. His nicotine stained mustache arched, revealing black, rotten teeth in a snarl. Rain smiled uncomfortably, a nervous reaction that he'd learned during his father's reign, just a little something that his mother used to do right before another verbal berating. Oh, geez, man, I'm sorry. I guess I got a little over exuberant with the bell ringing. Junior stared at him silently with those red, runny eyes, those diseased yellow corneas. His Confederacy flag t shirt reading, Try burning this flag, rose and fell with each steady breath. I, Junior rolled yellow fingers as thick as sausages, urging him to tell what needed to be told. So I guess I need a room for the night. Junior studied Rain with those piercing red eyes, his lips snarled like an angry dog before shooting them to Moon. Moon shifted uncomfortably in her stance and made sure the spaghetti straps of her dress were all pulled up tight on her shoulders without really realizing it under the glare of those dead eyes. Junior smiled and returned those horrible eyes to Rain.
Son, I ain't gonna have problems with you two, am I?
His voice had a distinctive Texas drawl. His fingers danced on the tabletop, a skeleton-faced pinky ring grinning against his knuckle. Problems? Rain squeaked in a voice that showed more fear than he was willing to admit. Um, no, sir. Why would you? Junior sighed heavily, the Try Burning This Flag t shirt jumping as he did so. His eyes returned to Moon.
What about your whore here? Are we gonna have problems, Missy?
He leaned across the table toward her, and she reactively retreated a step. Rain slammed his fist on the table, rattling the little silver bell and knocking a swimsuit calendar off the wall behind the counter. Miss February, no doubt appreciating the rest from Junior's leering eyes. Now you just wait a goddamn minute. She ain't no whore. Junior's eyes shot back to Rain, his bushy brows scrunched together.
Now, son, you'll want to be careful in how you talk to me.
His sausage fingers turned into fists planted on the table. Moon grabbed Rain by the elbow.
It's okay, hon. Don't matter a bit to me. I've been called a whore before. I guess our good old buddy here just wants to make sure I'm not going to trash the place if I don't pay, is all.
Rain's head snapped around and he caught Moon's eyes begging him to follow along. She was a survivor. He could see that. He'd let the emotions of the car ride conversation get the better of him. He couldn't take Junior in a fight, of course he knew that. But he was enraged all the same. What right did this hillbilly have to call her a whore? He didn't know the first thing about her. Moon smirked, that slow, cute, knowing smirk of hers. That one that no doubt made the boys leave all their singles at the club. That was, of course, if any of her stories were even true.
It's okay, Junior. I already got my money from him. We just need a space for a few hours, is all.
Junior roared a brief laugh, the kind of laugh that sounded like distant thunder, the kind of guttural laugh that made your skin crawl. He ran his fat tongue over his tobacco-stained mustache. He reached underneath the counter and pulled out a keyring with the number 101 etched on it.
I'll need cash up front, of course. And when you two are done, you can drop the key off back at my desk.
Moon snatched the keyring and Junior's hand shot out like a rattlesnake, seizing her wrist. She whimpered under the pressure of his fat fingers.
And you.
He smiled, those black teeth showing, those runny eyes glaring.
You be sure to come back here when you're done with them. I can think of a few things that I'll need you for.
He again licked his mustache with his fat, cracked tongue. Moon forced an impossible smile and twisted free of his grip, his fingerprint pressure still visible on her skin. She bit her bottom lip and grinned as she crammed the key down the front of her dress.
Oh, you can lay down a hundo and bet on that, honey bunny. I'll be back. Lickety split.
Rain pulled a crumpled $20 bill out of his pocket and tossed it onto the counter. Junior grabbed the money in his meaty paw, his red, runny eyes all the while focused on Moon, looking her up and down. Moon fought a grimace and instead forced a smile and grabbed Rain by the arm.
Come on, honey. We don't have time. I don't know how long old Junior's going to be able to keep it in his pants.
Junior roared his deep, rattling laugh, and Moon pulled Rain by the elbow out of the tiny motel office and back into the dark desert night. They passed a droning, dripping ice machine and were walking underneath an old metal awning when he finally twisted free of her grip. Why'd you do that? Why'd you let him think you were a whore? The disappointment in his voice was impossible to conceal. She looked at her bare feet and twiddled her toes on the asphalt parking lot.
I told you before, sometimes it's just easier to let people think what they want to think.
She rubbed absently at the scar in the crook of her elbow, that sore that would never heal. But he thinks you're going to go back there and fuck him. Rain sounded indignant, repulsed even. Moon popped a pinky in her mouth and twisted her toes on the asphalt.
Well, then he's going to be awfully disappointed, isn't he?
She giggled. Rain dropped his head and shook it as they headed toward motel room number 101. Blue Oasis Inn was one of those mid 1960s roadside motels that were all slowly fading into American lore. It was a different time back then. Families piled into Cadillacs and headed west on summer vacations full of roadside attractions, Native American jewelry shops full of silver and turquoise trinkets, roadside burger and shake diners, and of course, roadside motels. The roadside motels had sprung up to offer the family patriarchs relief from their long, dusty drives. They were listed in AAA's travel guide, so they had to be flashy. They had to have an allure, an appealing aesthetic. Names like Mountain Fox, Desert Rose, and Blue Lagoon adorned the pages alongside the photos of their flashy decor. It was an arms race in kitsch, themed motels painted in bright pinks and blues, 20-foot neon signs of lagoons, roses, or foxens, large enough to catch even the weariest of eyes from the roadway. Still, other motels leaned in, one promising to be the motel of the future, with stainless steel facades and futuristic cursive neon beckoning travelers to an otherworldly experience. Built back when the space age was still new and exciting, something more than a taxi service, other motels offered a sci fi adventure. Each one seemingly upping the stakes. They were all hoping to catch enough attention to keep their operations afloat. But things had changed. Family road trip vacations had fizzled with the advent of affordable air travel, and those relics were left to fade and ultimately crumble under the unrelenting desert sun. But a few remained. Even the most steadfast trucker occasionally wanted to stretch his legs in a bed for a night. And in that place between prosperity and squalor is where the Blue Oasis Inn found herself. Her glory days were 40 years in a rearview mirror. Now, everything was held together with duct tape and whatever Junior could find in the local dumpster. She was marketed as an oasis in the desert, full of plastic palm trees and earth tones. Part decay and part decor, inside room 101, everything was in desert theme. Walls filled with cactus paintings, silhouette coyotes baying at silhouette moons. Everything was painted in avocado green and rust. Moon walked right in, her bare feet swishing on the shitty orange shag carpeting.
I don't know about you, Rain, but I need to wash some of this road funk off me.
Rain emptied his pockets on the nightstand, a wad of crumpled cash and a few gas station receipts. He collapsed on the bed, the springs squealing their disapproval. His duct tape boots screeched and strained, but he was too tired to kick them off. He laid on his back and stared at the water stained ceiling. Somewhere in the near distance, he heard Moon twist open the bath faucets. Farther away, a couple were talking. Their conversation was in hushed, muffled tones told through sheetrock. They sounded like they were having a cordial enough conversation, but he'd spent 17 years under Heath's roof. Hadn't they always started that way? He closed his eyes as the pipes jangled and water roared into the tub. A loud bang awakened him. He wasn't sure how long he'd been out, but Moon had still not returned with the ice bucket, so it couldn't have been that long. Something had hit the wall behind the headboard and hard. He looked up at the cockeyed baying wolf painting that hung there. Rain sat up in his bed, trying to gather his senses. Something had hit the wall behind him in the adjacent room. Something loud and heavy. Something with enough force to knock that old coyote cockeyed. He jumped when the bang returned. This time the whole wall shook, and the coyote moon painting loosed itself from the wall and crashed down somewhere behind the bed. The bang was followed by a guttural grunt and the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Through the thin sheetrock, a man's voice boomed.
You fucking whore! Now look what you made me do!
He sounded both mad and disappointed at the same time. An unmistakable, muffled sobbing ensued, the light, huffing sobs of a frightened woman. He'd heard it all before. He'd lived this already. Rain closed his eyes and could see the scene played out in his head. He was home again. Heath had thrown a tumbler of bourbon at Sylvia and missed. It had exploded on the wall like a bomb, showering her in hot, sticky alcohol and glass fragments. She sat on the floor, her eye already starting to blacken from that first good wallop. The second slap had split her lip and filled her mouth with blood. Tears ran mascara down her cheeks in thick black streaks.
Uh, I?
The woman in room 100 stammered through a tear-choked voice.
I want to hear your shit! You dress like a whore, expect to be treated like a whore!
The stranger in room 100 raged. Rain hated Heath. He wished he could have done something back then to protect his mother from his wrath. But by the time he had finally gotten strong enough to fight back, she'd, as Heath had put it, gone and had herself a little accident. So c'est la vie, the rest was history. Heath had left them in his rear view and took his ferocity north to a new, unsuspecting family. Now, here sitting on the bed in the Blue Oasis Inn, Rain assured himself that he didn't want to get involved. Of course, he hated to hear the abuse as it was happening, but ultimately he assured himself it wasn't his business, that his intervention would do more harm than good. That's how it worked with those guys. He'd seen it enough with Heath. When the alcohol was thick in his veins, he could do monstrous acts. But as it thinned, as its intensity faded, he always backed down. Guys like that sometimes just needed the good hard on that only blood and tears could bring. And then they'd apologize. They always did. Didn't make it right, or even close to it, but it did mean that there would be an end to the commotion. If he intervened now, he would just delay the end. He could prolong her suffering. Sometimes it was just easier to wait out the rage. Besides, he just wanted a good night's sleep. As he had when Heath and Sylvia were heading into round three, Rain kept his eyes closed and tried to ignore everything. It was quieting down, maybe his damage had been done and he was already launching into the alcohol kiss apologies. But Rain wasn't that lucky. Instead, the man in room 100 was just getting started. A third slap, harder than the other two, echoed through his room. The unmistakable stinging sound of flesh on flesh. Rain was on his feet. The slap was followed by a low, deep thud that sounded like a kick. He heard the woman on the other side of the wall gasp for air and wondered if this time the man would go too far. He'd always feared it with Heath, that he would walk right up to that edge, peer into the abyss, and just choke the life out of his mother. But he never did. Heath wanted intimidation. He wanted compliance. He didn't want murder. But the stranger on the other side of the sheetrock wasn't Heath. Lord only knew what his intentions were.
Please?
Her voice was struggled, her breath impossible to grab a hold of. This time, he was going too far.
Oh, fuck you, you stupid whore. I told you you'd pay for all those free drinks the good old boys were buying you tonight. It's all fun and games making old Hank look like a sack of shit until we have to share our hotel room, that is. And now, I'll show you what's what. Show you who the fuck is in charge around here.
A gurgling, gasping sound came through the sheetrock. It was unmistakable. He was going too far. He was killing her.
You made me look like a fool in front of them.
He screamed through clenched teeth. Another kick, another gasping breath, and Rain was headed for the door. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he couldn't just sit there and listen to her die. He couldn't. Moon slapped the plastic bucket underneath the ice machine's throat and palmed the button. The machine slowly churned to life, frozen mnemonic gears whining as the cubes began to drop, one agonizingly slow click at a time. With her palm pressed on the button, her mind wandered. Rain was different. She could see it in his eyes. He had secrets, and he would not share them. That much was apparent. Even in just the first day of knowing him, she knew that. But even as differently as he'd acted, she wondered if it was just that, an act. Was this all something that he was trying to achieve, some personality that he aspired to be, some alternate version of himself that he wished he was? Was he so painstakingly normal, so miserably average, that he had to create this alternative persona that was preordained to be unique, to be mysterious? She smiled. She knew a little something about that. She tapped a tune atop the machine as it vomited ice into her bucket, one clinking cube at a time. Her twiddling fingers danced in a drum roll. How far could she follow him? He'd said he was headed west. She'd told him that she was headed to Albuquerque, but she wasn't. She had fuck all to be. Everything she owned was in that guitar case, and there wasn't shit waiting for her back in West Texas. She figured she'd ride with him as long as he'd let her. When she'd fled Texas, she hadn't really considered where she was going, and hadn't really cared. When he asked her, she'd just spit out Albuquerque to buy some time until she could think of a better destination. But now, if she really thought about it, California sounded about right. Wasn't that where everyone who was trying to get away eventually got away to? The unmistakable sound of gunfire echoed through the motel parking lot, a curb bang like a dry firecracker in the summer heat. She dropped the ice bucket, cubes rolling underneath the machine, and ran back toward room 101, her bare feet slapping asphalt.
I said in a minute.
Hank screamed from the other side of the seafoam green door to room 100. Rain stood outside the doorway, fists clenched at his side. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he knew he had to do something. It was that gurgling sound that had finally gotten him moving. It was unmistakable. She was dying. He was choking the life out of her, and he couldn't just sit there and listen to it.
Shut up, bitch. Someone's at the door.
He was drunk. Rain could tell from his voice. Everything was louder than he thought it was, and his tongue was too thick for proper enunciation. It was just how drunks were. Slowly, the door cracked inward, and Rain was greeted by a man in his white v-neck t-shirt, boxer shorts, and black-socked feet. He was half in the hallway and half hidden by the door that he was using for balance. Swaying on his feet, he was a couple of drinks past where he should be. His face was flush red, his hair was plastered with sweat. Black horn rimmed glasses were crooked on his face, like he'd hastily put them on just to answer the door. Rain surmised that they were about the same height, but figured he had about 15 to 20 pounds on him. So if it came to a tussle, he liked his chances.
Something I can help you with?
His head pitched and bowed on an unsteady neck. His eyes were bloodshot and unfocused behind those thick glasses. The way he'd cracked open the door was calculated. He was trying to hide the inside of the hotel room, to hide whatever horrors he had perpetuated on the crying girl that had only now gone silent. And yet still, Rain could see an overturned lamp on the orange shag carpeting behind the man. It was broken in half, he assumed by either the woman's head or the motel wall. Rain loosened his fist and ran a hand through his hair, feigning exasperation. Look, man. It's just been a long fucking day, is all. You know how it is, driving across that barren landscape out there where nothing changes and with Miss Little Yakety Yak back here gabbing the whole time. He hand puppeted a mouth talking and rolled his eyes. He was trying to get the guy on his side, trying his best to defuse the situation. It's just it's just fucking monotonous, you know? Shit wears you out. Anyway, look, I just came over here just to ask you to keep it down a bit is all. Look, brother, you would be doing me and the missus a big fucking solid. Hank's face twisted into brief rage and was immediately replaced by a plastic smile. He was an expert at hiding his emotions from others, from hiding the true monster that he could become behind closed doors, but the alcohol was making that more difficult. Booze had a way of slowing everything down. True psychopaths like Heath could smile while they lied to you. And it's what he was doing. It was just a little slow in coming, the alcohol revealing his true feelings, if even only momentarily.
I'm not sure what you mean.
He swayed on his feet, leaning against the door for balance, half in and half out of the room. The teal door pitched and swayed under his weight before he regained his balance. Rain wanted to slap that fake plastic smile off his face. But he was trying his hand at diplomacy first, so he sighed. Look, friend, I don't want to get into your business, but don't you think you've roughed her up enough? I get it, brother. I've got a real mouthy bitch too, and sometimes I tell you, I just want to. Hank's smile vanished, his black eyes narrowed behind those glasses, focusing on Rain. He spoke slow and deliberate through clenched teeth.
And just who the fuck do you think you are?
The real Hank was being shown. To hell with the fake facades. It was time to get down to business. The booze was giving him a confidence beyond his means. Rain's shoulders slumped, realizing that his chance at diplomacy was fading. His hands returned to his side and knotted into tight fists. His attempts at diffusing the situation were failing, just as he'd always known they would. Men like Hank only knew violence. Any problem could be solved with a well-placed fist.
I suggest, my friend,
Heavily enunciated and steeped with sarcasm.
that you mosey on back to pay your own fucking Minesville.
Look, I get it, friend. Sometimes women can be a real see you next. Slowly, loudly, and deliberately, he interrupted.
No, you don't get it.
Rain loosened his fist and showed his palms and patted the air like he was a suspect surrendering to the cops. Look, bro, I don't want to start anything. I just want some fucking sleep is all. Like I said, it's been a fuck all doozy of a day, and with you playing punching bag with your lady in there, it is fucking impossible to catch some shut-eye. Hank opened the door a little more than he'd really intended, swaying on his heels for a moment as he regained his balance. Just behind him, an empty bottle of Jack Daniels lay upended on the floor next to the broken lamp. And wasn't it always whiskey with these guys? He never happened along a domestic violence situation with a bottle of Pinot Grigio soaking into the shag carpeting. No, it was always the hard stuff. The stuff these guys loved, but couldn't quite control. The lamp strip power cord snaked around the empty bottle of Jack. Its wall plug plucked away, no doubt in the heat of brandishing the lamp as a weapon. Had he hit her with the lamp? Or had he simply thrown it at her? And more ominously, the cord. Why was it laying in such close proximity to the door? Had he dropped it there to answer Rain's knocks? Had it previously been wrapped around her neck? Was it the cause for the horrific gurgling sound that had finally set Rain's feet to motion? He briefly ran through these scenarios, but was quickly snapped back to reality when he saw the man reach around the door with a snub-nosed revolver and level it toward his face. Rain didn't think, he reacted. He kicked the door with such a force that the tape holding his boots together split and gave way to shooing him in one quick motion. The door rocked inward on its hinges and slapped Hank in the face. The force threw him backwards, somewhere inside the room. The gun that he'd been holding fired as he lost his grip with it. The sound was deafening. The gun rode the orange shag carpeting into an open bathroom, stopping on the same lime green tile as Rain's bathroom. Those 1960s motel designers weren't about to buy multiple colors of tile, apparently. They had a design, and they were sticking to it. Hank, laying on his back from the force of the blow, rolled onto his hands and knees and began scrambling for his gun. Rain raced into the room and kicked Hank full in the stomach. Hank pitched and rolled onto his back, still a few feet from reaching his gun. Television tough guy, eh? Moon's words escaped his lips. You can smack her in the face, but you can't go toe-to-toe with a man your size without bringing a fucking gun into things? Rain's face twisted in something resembling pity for the shame of the fallen man. He was pathetic. He was Heath version 2.0. Rain pounded his chest with a clenched fist and said, I'm right here, you son of a bitch. Won't you come at me? Hank rolled on the floor, huffing for breath, his face red, his mouth an exaggerated O. Seemingly unable to get to his feet, his mouth agape, gasping. Rain figured, boot or no boot, he'd probably snapped a couple of the guy's ribs. Rain checked on the woman. She was slumped in the corner, her knees brought to her chest, her face buried in a shroud of hair and embarrassment. She was sobbing quietly. Miss, are you okay? He knew better, of course he did. Hank was playing possum. As soon as Rain's attention was diverted, even for a second, Hank scrambled for the gun. He dove into the bathroom and seized it. He rolled onto his back, and Rain was on top of him. In one quick motion, Rain shoved his arms down, and the gun fired. The gunshot tore through Rain's eardrums, but fortunately for him, the bullet found no juicy home in his skin. Hank's teeth clenched and his nostrils flared. With his horn-rimmed glasses still crooked, he fought to bring the gun back to Rain's face. Rain's head was ringing and confused from the gunshot, but he was aware enough to know that Hank was trying to lift the gun to his temple. So, he released his hands and allowed him to bring his arms back upright. As he did so, Rain again took hold of his arms and pitched him over with all of his weight behind him. Their combined momentum sent them barrel rolling toward the nightstand, each desperately trying to get control of the gun. They barrel rolled in this fashion toward the nightstand, and somewhere in the midst of the commotion, a third and final gunshot fired.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dark Passages. Please join us next week as the story continues. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share, and rate and review us on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts. Please follow us on dark.passages.podcast on Instagram for additional information and episode release schedules. Original music by Iriamu. You can find more of his music through his Instagram page at iriamu.music or on Bandcamp at iriamu1@bandcamp.com. Original stories are all written by Chris Stone and are available on Amazon as ebooks. I'm Savannah, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.